Hi, so I thought I'd do some videos about my Rover P5B Coupe. Thought might be interesting for people to see what I'm doing to my car. Obviously you've probably seen the roverp5.com website, and this is the heap that I'm working on when I'm not trying to manage the website. So, I'll try and give you a view. As you can see, it's in a really small garage. Garage doesn't have any electricity, so that makes working on the car really interesting. But yeah, it's crammed in. There's stuff on the roof, there's stuff on shelves over there. It's just really tight. It's a big car. So, give you a bit of history on the car. I bought it about 3 years ago. Needed lots doing to it. It hadn't been driven a lot over the last few years. And yeah, there were just 1,000 little things that needed fixing. There's a few bits of bodywork that will need doing as well, but I wanted to get it mechanically fairly well sorted, so I could drive it around and get it worked on. So as you can see, the car is looking a bit sad for itself. Rear lights are out. I'm currently working on the rear brakes. I've got the drums apart, refurbished all that, put new cylinders in. I'm also running new lines from the front, and replacing the handbrake mechanism, which was seized and badly adjusted. Handbrake's rod based, it's not cable. So yeah, I just thought I'd start doing some videos about what I'm doing and go from there. So yeah. Okay, so the garage is pretty dark. This is the inside. It looks messy. I've replaced a lot of the interior. You can see door trims are off currently. But the main thing I've done, apart from refurbishing brakes, engine, rear springs, I'm going to have to do the front suspension at some point. The main thing I've done is replace the loom, and while I replaced the loom, I replaced a lot of the interior. There are new carpets, which you can maybe just see. I've replaced the vinyl on the kind of knee rail here, padded. That's vinyl. This is all new vinyl. And I'm going to get the seats recovered in leather. I also refinished a lot of the veneer that was water damaged in places, and the new loom is in. It's all working. Basically, I found a new old stock loom on eBay, and it was for a car about 2 years later than this, so things like the coil were in a different place, but it was basically the right loom for this car. Brand new old stock in very good condition. I was a bit worried that some of the cabling might have decayed, or you know, the insulation hardened, but actually it hadn't. It must have been stored in a good environment. So I've replaced most of the loom, and that's all working. I replaced the loom last year. I'll show a short clip in a minute of my relief when the engine started after I'd replaced the loom, and that's all working. The engine's running. I drove the car out, turned it around and put it in the way it's in now, so I can work on the back, the rear brakes. While I was doing the loom and the front, I mean, I refurbished all the engine, didn't strip the engine block, but stripped all the ancillaries off, repainted them, reconditioned them, rebuilt the wiper motor, things like that. But I think that's all in the video. And yeah, this is, I mean, the problem is I don't get a lot of time to work on the car, you know, kind of Saturdays, a few hours generally. In the summer I can do a bit more. In the winter it's a bit miserable out here, so I don't do a lot. But yeah, this is my hobby. Right, it's Friday 24th of August 2018, and the Rover has started finally. It's basically 50 years, give or take a day or two, I think, from the day that it was built. Left the Rover factory in Solihull, England. I have taken it I took it off the road about 2 years ago because there were so many problems with it. I'd only just bought the car and I drove it a bit, but there were just lots and lots of problems with the car. Basically, random electrical things kept breaking, stopping working, then they start working. So many bodges have been done on the car over the years, so also the car failed its MOT quite spectacularly. So I took it off the road, reconditioned, completely dismantled the rear springs, rear suspension, reconditioned all of that, new bushes. I started tidying up the wiring, and then basically there'd been a small engine fire, and what they'd done is cut the loom at the end of each end of the dashboard, and just crimped together another loom that was from the wrong model in the engine bay. So there was like a massive bunch of connections at the end of the dashboard. You can go over a bump and they'd move and things would stop working. The whole thing was just a real mess. So I got a new old stock loom off eBay for this car. Not quite the right year, but very, very similar. Adapted that, fitted a brand new loom, took most of the interior out. It's still not finished, but I re-veneered a lot of the wood. Recovered all of the vinyl. Got to get the front seats reupholstered in leather, but got new door panels for it. They're not fitted yet. Covered most of the interior, the vinyl, the old vinyl, redone that. While I was doing the engine was a real mess, so I took most of all of the ancillaries off the engine and have reconditioned most of those, even things like the heater fan and the fan motor, the wiper motor, all of the things like power steering reservoir, new power steering hoses, brake reservoir, washer reservoir, servo reservoir, vacuum reservoir, all of the pipes reconditioned, replaced all of those, painted everything properly, then reconditioned all the brakes, so fitted a new master cylinder which was weeping, brand new copper brake pipes, new front calipers. I haven't done the back yet. I need to turn the car around, which is why starting it is really important, because I need to turn the car around so I can get to the rear of the car, replace all the pipes and the flexible hoses in the brakes, may replace the rear cylinders, because this car doesn't have dual circuit brakes, so if you lose the brakes, you lose the brakes. I need to recondition the handbrake mechanism still and adjust that. The handbrake isn't great, and that's one of the things it failed the MOT on. And I think that is about it so far. Still some way to go, but getting the car starting is a real major milestone. I mean, having replaced all of the loom, you kind of think, what's going to happen when I connect the battery and start it up? So I've spent the last few days, I'll show you at some point, but basically very, very, very carefully with an electronic circuit breaker, testing each circuit. Everything seems to work so far. The only thing that don't are the hazard warning lights, which I've added, so I need to look into that. I think everything else works. I've just spent a couple of hours fiddling with the electric fuel pump. There's a Facet electric fuel pump, which is an aftermarket fitting, but basically it didn't self-prime, so I got a mouthful of petrol priming that. But yeah, so basically I shall show you the state of it and then start it. Okay, so this is the state of the wiring so far. So this is the main instrument binnacle. It's got all of the switches, or most of the switches, and the instruments that it's flopped down at the moment, being held up by wire. But I've reconditioned all of the binnacle itself, all of the instruments, and even the supplementary gauges which sit down there, all been reconditioned. You can see the main loom in there. It goes along the back of the dashboard. You can barely see it, and then it goes down and connects to the rear loom in the passenger footwell. That's all been replaced. Yeah, so let's start the car. Oh, no. There you go. Got the rev counter is working. We've got maybe just see that. We've got oil pressure normal and amps when I rev the engine. The alternator's charging. The other dials, you can't really see them, but they're fuel. And water temperature is down there. Okay, so that's the state of the interior. You can probably hear the exhaust is blowing. The car does need a new exhaust. There is a working engine. So here's the rear brakes. I've got the hub off, or the drum off. Drum just screws, 3 screws, and then it's just held on by the wheel. I've replaced the wheel cylinders. I've replaced the brakes, the shoes. I have refurbished all the adjuster, which is just over there. Trying to show you that. That's the brake adjuster is just there. New springs. Basically, most of it is new because it was pretty horrible the way it was. The handbrake mechanism I'm currently still refurbishing. Basically, there's a drawbar in there that the cable, the rods pull, and when that's pulled, there are rollers and sliders in here that push out. So when that's pulled in, they get pushed out. The shoes get pushed out against the drum. It's pretty effective, but it does need to be set up correctly. So you can't. This is all loose because I'm replacing the rubber boots, but you can just see that slides rather stiff. It needs freeing up again. but you can kind of see it, that bar slides in and out and it pushes the shoes out. So yeah, so I am refurbishing that. This is one of the brackets that goes under the car. So I think it's the handbrake relay lever. So you can see that's all been refurbished. I actually bushed it as well. It was just running on metal on metal, so I put some phosphor bronze bushes in. I'm not sure if that's a good idea because it's sitting under the car, but we'll see. So that's going to go back under the car. And yeah, what I'm doing currently is so these rubber boots go on the back plate, and the handbrake rod, this rod goes through there. It's just like a waterproof boot, so I've got to fit that on the back plate, and then I can tighten up the cylinder. The cylinder floats, so you don't tighten it up completely. There are sprung washers, I've forgotten the name of them. Yeah, gone. Sprung washers so that the whole cylinder can float slightly to center itself. So you don't tighten this up completely. Obviously it's going to be tighter than that, but it should slide slightly on the back plate. So that's what I'm going to try and do. Okay, so I am going to mount the rubber boot. You can see it goes into a backing plate to hold it in place. Oops. So I'm going to mount that on the back of the drum. These are the washers, and I remembered what they're called. They're called Thackeray Washers. They are sprung, they're kind of double wound and sprung, different to normal kind of spring washers. Very specific for these. So basically these hold the wheel cylinder against the back plate and keep it under tension so that it can slide, but also it's not too loose. So the backing plate will go on the back of the back plate. I'm just going to grease it slightly so that it does slide. I'm using Mintex brake grease, which was recommended. What you don't want to use is normal grease. So let's put some grease on that. I always put too much grease on things, but hey ho. Okay, so that is going to go on the rear. Getting it over the brake, handbrake pull is one of the hardest bits. Okay, let's just take the bleed nipple out so that I can get this cover on. Okay, let's get in there. What you have to be a bit careful of with these rubber boots, and when I got the car it didn't have these rubber boots on. I think they get left off because they're such a fiddle, but obviously they do stop muck getting into the inside the brake drum and the handbrake mechanism. You just need to make sure they're not poached because they will tear. This is actually my second replacement one because I tore the first one Okay, it's looking good. And the Thackeray washer goes on, and then the locking night lock nut, and the Thackeray washers and the nylock nuts are new, from Wadham's, JR Wadham's, which is, well, the main supplier of parts for these cars. Okay, so I've got the lock nuts loosely on, and the Thackeray washers. I've got the bleed nipple back into the back of the cylinder. It's going through the rubber boot that we've just put on. And so I'm just going to tighten up with a 7/16 spanner the lock nuts. Well, I'll say tighten them up and then back them off slightly. It's one of the challenges actually with this car that I'm not that familiar, or I wasn't that familiar with imperial spanners. I still get a bit confused, but most of the so I had to buy imperial tools, not metric, but also things like threads. It's a bit of a nightmare. Most of the threads on these are UNF or UNC threads, but I just find it quite confusing if you've grown up with metric. But yeah, most of them are UNF or UNC, and you can still get all of those. I think this is a 7/16 spanner, so I don't want to over tighten them, but then this is the second time I've done this, because this is how I tore the rubber boot. Keeping Wadham's in business in rubber boots. So I'm going to back it off 1/4 of a turn, and then do similar to this one. Just tighten it up. Back it off 1/4 of a turn, and then just see. Okay, that's not sliding, so let's back them off another 1/4 of a turn. Okay, you can see the cylinder can move. Can it slide? Yeah. Not really. Go a bit further back. So you see the cylinder can move, so it's not tight. It's kind of difficult to tell. There you go. So you can see it can slide a little bit. Don't know if you can see that. You can see if you look at the cylinder moving slightly. I might just tighten them up a little bit. Just going 1/4 of a turn each time. Yeah, that can move. Go a little bit more. Oops. Just about. Okay, so I'm going to leave it for that for now. And so I mean, if there's a problem, then I can adjust this. Luckily, the drums come off really easily. On the grease, I've used on the brakes this Mintex grease. It was recommended to me. You can use copper slip, I think, as well. What you don't want to use is a grease that's going to melt at temperature, or one that's going to harden over time. So this was recommended, so that's what I'm going to use, see how we get on. I've used that inside the handbrake mechanism that pushes the shoes out as well, and cleaned everything, refurbished it all. Okay, so I think that is okay, as far as I can tell. You can probably see that the rear springs I've refurbished. I had them retempered. You can, well, you can get replacements, but they used to, the older ones used to make the car sit high at the back, which I didn't like the look of. So I had these retempered at a place in London, Brost Forge, and they retempered them. I kind of greased them, painted them, and then wrapped them. And I've actually wrapped them in Denso tape, which is really messy but really good. And then I've put a gaiter over them as well, which Rover used to do. They didn't wrap them in Denso tape, they just put the gaiter over, but I think the Denso tape is really good. Really messy, but you know, they use it on transmission masts and things like that, and for wrapping pipes. Really keeps water out. And yeah, I've just put the gaiter over, so those have been replaced. All the shackles replaced, bushes, all the rear suspension has been done. The handbrake mechanism is going to be next, and replace the rear pipes. I've replaced the front pipes all around the front subframe, new master cylinder, cleaned out the reservoir, so new copper pipes. I did use copper. Some people say use copper nickel, but I went with copper. So I'm going to finish running those, and then hopefully we can get the car out. Well, actually, then it's the handbrake mechanism. Then we can get the car out and start doing some other bits. Okay, so this is an example of imperial threads. So I'm replacing the brake lines, and the brake lines on the Rover are clipped to the bodywork using little clamps, bent metal clamps that screw into the subframe and into the sill and wherever the brake pipes go. So I'm replacing the original mild-steeled ones with stainless steel versions. I think the brake pipes are 3/16 of an inch, so these are to clamp to the bodywork, and the screws that they are held in place with are these things. They're cheese head or dome head, flat, not Phillips. Posi-Drive I don't think existed when these cars were built, but they used flathead screwdriver, and this is a cheese head, I think, or dome head. But trying to identify this thread, especially when it's partly rusted, it's just been a nightmare. So I ended up basically ordering a load of different screws to see what I could get to fit. I mean, I've got thread gauges and calipers to try and work out the size, but it's, you know, there are so many subtle differences. So I narrowed it down, I think, to UNF. I'm just reading. This is the invoice. So I narrowed it down to UNF 836 and 832. 32 and 36 being the number of threads per inch, I think. Threads per inch. And you know, you would think maybe you should be able to tell the difference between the two, but I couldn't. The old screws are rusty. Yeah, it's just really difficult to tell. So I ordered both. Seems as though they are actually 832, and then sorry, they're 836. I couldn't get half inch, which is what I wanted, half inch length, so I got 3/4 inch length. Couldn't get flathead, so got Phillips, but they're stainless steel. So what, 20 of those cost £9. you can see how things mount up quite quickly. So these are the beauties that are as near to original as I can get. I mean, I could put the originals in, but where I can, I'm replacing things with stainless steel fasteners. I know stainless steel isn't as strong, so I'm not using them on suspension and brake parts that come under load. I don't know whether they're okay or not, but I'm using mild steel for things that are under any load. But for general fixings, bolting things to in the engine bay, the things like the servo and things like that aren't under load, I'm using stainless steel fixings and putting copper slip on, because stainless steel galls, it kind of catches as you screw it in or out. It's not as kind of lubricious, if that's a word, I think it is, as mild steel. So I use copper slip on them as well, and yeah, they should last another probably 100 years. So yeah, I just thought I'd mention that, because that has been a running issue trying to get the right screws. I mean, as I say, most of them are UNF, UNC, so you can get kits on eBay for the engine, stainless steel bolts in kits. A lot of the alloy, the bolt things that bolt into the alloy block of the V8, the Rover V8, use UNC, the coarse UN thread, but most of the fittings are UNF, and yeah, you need a selection of them. But little things like this, they don't come in a kit or anything. You just have to try and figure out what the right thread is, and I think I've done it for the little clips that hold the brake pipes in. When I did the front, I think I reused the mild steel ones, because the front, it's kind of, I mean, these are kind of 60s British cars, they're not exactly oil tight, this one especially. So most of the subframe is covered in oil, but I wanted to get stainless steel, along the sills. There's a brake pipe that runs, and I may replace the ones at the front sometime. Now I know what the right thread is.